Okay, time for our novel. We are on chapter 1. 13? I believe we're on 13. Yep. Madrone is left on the back of a wagon, headed to the Southlands by herself. Chapter 13. Madrone laid another stick on her fire, watching the warm light of the sunset color the ocean waves gold and violet. If her count was correct, it was the night of the winter solstice. She had been traveling for 2 weeks now, making her slow way down through the coastal mountains, through canyons, thick with redwoods and peeling madrones, their gray outer bark pulled back to reveal the reds and bronzes and purples of the papery inner bark, and beneath it, smooth green gold skin. They were her talismans. She, too, was stripping and peeling. It had been so long since she had spent days in silence. It had been so long since she'd had no one to answer to, no one to be responsible for except herself. Now she waited in a place Bird had described, the strip of sand with the rotting pier at the southern end of the mountains, where the land leveled off into rolling dunes. It might be days, he had said, maybe longer, before the Webb sent a boat to cruise the pickup site. They traded, he'd been told, with some of the groups inland from here, but the pickups were irregularly. Certainly she had seen no one else here. While she had conserved her food, gathering nuts from the woods and living off the land as much as possible, she couldn't wait forever. She'd had a sudden picture of herself, old as Maya, still waiting, never knowing when to give up and go back home. Suddenly she wished, more than anything, that she were home. In the city now, the gondolas would be filled with people laughing and singing on their way to the beaches, where they would plunge into the cold, cold waters of the winter to cleanse themselves of the faults of the year, ignoring for this one night the threat of toxins. The sea dikes would be all right with fires. As the dark fell, the gondolas would come alive with the flames of candles, carrying the Yule fire back to the hearths. Then, later, there would be food, roast wild pig brought down to the city by the wild boar people, exiles banished for antisocial behavior who were allowed back at this time of year to sell their wares at market. For the vegetarians, plates would be piled high with tofu and sweet potatoes, and bowls would brim with red chili. In Black Dragon House, the altars for the dead had been taken down before Madrone left. The family altar was rearranged to feature a nativity scene in which a statue of the Venus of Willendorf, ample and fertile, stood next to a golden ball that represented the sun, reborn on the solstice out of the womb of the mother night. Madrone had helped Sage collect figurines and small stuffed animals to witness the central scene. Plastic dinosaurs, carved wooden dogs playing instruments, small painted angels from Germany, a wind-up Godzilla devouring Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, a set of clay snakes made long ago by a child. Tonight at home, they were all gathered together, keeping vigil all night long, baking the solstice bread that filled the house with its fragrance, singing the drumming and telling stories. At dawn they would climb the hills, ringing bells and beating drums to chant and dance as the sun rose. They were not lonely. Maybe she should have waited until after the holidays. But once she had made up her mind, delay had become unbearable. No, She couldn't have gone through celebrations, knowing all along that each thing she did might be for the last time. She shivered. Her fire was going well, and she placed a fat log on top and waited as it caught. The sun was almost down. Really, there ought to be a battery of ritual drummers here to raise power. Alone in the silence with only the power she could raise with an act of will. She stripped quickly and walked into the waves. The water burned cold on her legs and thighs. She waded in gingerly up to her breast and, bracing herself against the pull of the tide, splashed her face and crown of her head and the nape of her neck. Let it go. Sickness and despair and hurt and loss, anger and humiliation and all the pain of the year. Wash it away. Take away with it the turning of the tide, the turning of the wheel. Light played around her, silver and gold and purple. She sang the old Yoruba chant to Yemaya, the sea goddess. Yemaya ase esu, ase esu, Yemaya, Yemaya, olodo, olodo Yemaya. 3 more days went by before the boat came. It appeared on the horizon. Its patched sails looked like a collection of rags on sticks. Wind spinners and solar panels dangled at odd angles, but it moved at a fast pace through the water, swooping into the bay and pulling up by the dock. The slender boat was about 30 feet long, trailing a small dinghy which a dark figure hauled to the side. With a graceful leap, the sailor swung into it and began rowing toward shore. Madrone stood up and waved her arms in a wide circle above her head. She felt a rush of anticipation mixed with fear. At last, it was really beginning. This work. After the next few moments, there would be no backing out, no last chance to change her mind and go home. The hole scraped on the sand, Madrone ran to grab the painter and haul it up. Before she could touch the rope, a laser rifle stared into her eyes. You move, and I fry your eyes like eggs on a griddle. The voice was deep and resonant, but clearly a woman's. Madrone took a step back. She was shocked, but not really frightened. It seemed too strange to her, unreal, to be actually facing a real weapon in hostile hands. She stifled an impulse to laugh. Now, who the Jesus are you? The woman asked. Her skin shone dark like the waves at night. Her hair was braided close to her head and studded with gold beads. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. Blue pants and a shirt of some soft material hugged the contours of her body. Each slight motion set muscles rippling beneath the cloth. My name is Madrone. I'm a healer from the north. Bird sent me. The woman regarded her for a long moment without lowering the gun. If that's true, she said at last, then you can tell me my name. Gracias a Diosa. Bird had prepared her well. Isis, Madrone said. Haul me in, Isis said, sitting back as Madrone grabbed the rope and began to pull the heavy load. But in an instant, the woman leaped out and dragged the boat up onto the beach as if it were weightless. She must be incredibly strong, Madrone thought, as the woman stuck out her hand in greeting. Madrone clasped it. She felt a sudden urge of raw attraction, like an electrical charge, exciting and disconcerting. How do I act? She asked herself suddenly. What rules apply here? Everyone she knew in her ordinary life was part of too familiar context, a history. They knew her already, or at least her reputation. They knew her family and her counsel and her patients and her history. She was accountable to them all. Here she could be anyone, do anything. There was no expectations. There was no one to disappoint. For just a moment, she savored the possibilities. You alone here? Madrone nodded. No traders been by? Not in a few days. Well, all right then. I'll I'll try again next week. Climb aboard. Isis rowed them out to the ship. Madrone climbed the rope ladder and hoisted herself over the rail. You do any sailing? Isis asked. I grew up sailing the bay. You know what I mean if I say ease the jib halyard? Yeah. Make fast the sheet? You'll have to show me how she's rigged, but I really do know how to sail. Okay then, sailor, let's make sail. By nightfall, they were far out to sea. Isis brewed sage tea on a small stove in her compact but complete cabin. A bed nestled under the curving bow, and padded benches along the walls appeared to fold out into other beds. A table folded down and a sink and cooler completed the galley. They dined on the last of Madrone's rice and Isis's fresh-caught sea bass, which Madrone ate with some uneasiness. It tasted delicious, but she couldn't help but think of Nita's repeated warnings about toxins in ocean fish. When they were finished, Isis carefully cleared away the dishes, washing them and setting them on the shelves behind the rails. She pulled out a bottle of wine. You like wine? She asked. This is an excellent Cabernet. I raided it myself from the storehouse of the chief steward of Long Beach. We don't get much wine in the city, Madrone said. We're still rehabilitating most of the old vineyard land. It got so toxed out from the pesticides, but I've always enjoyed it when I could get it. You'll like this, Isis assured her, pouring out 2 ruby glasses full. They sat facing each other a little awkwardly. There were 1,000 things Madrone wanted to ask her, but she didn't know how to begin. So you're a healer, Isis said. What does that mean? What exactly do you do? A lot of things, Madrone said. I deliver babies and teach women how to stay healthy and eat right when they're pregnant. I treat diseases either with medicines, if we have them, or with herbs, or with chi, with energy. And people have to pay you to help? Madrone shook her head. No. Nobody in the North pays for medical care. It's all free. The city pays me a stipend, as it does for most healers. Some of us put in for hours worked instead, but frankly, if I charged for my hours, the city couldn't afford me. It was the standard joke in the council, but Isis looked blank. I mean, keeping track of the hours is too much trouble. What about drugs? Isis asked. Who pays for the boosters? Immunoboosters? We don't have them. The stewards took all that with them when we rebelled. We've had to develop alternatives. And they work? You really get along with the stewards? And they work. You really get along without the stewards' drugs? Yes and no, Madrone said. We've had bad epidemics. We get through each one, but we keep losing people. I'd like to examine some boosters, find out how they work. If we could come up with something similar, it might save a lot of lives. I could get you some, Isis said. Really? No problem, honey. I am one hot pirate. You want something? I can get it for you. How did you become a pirate? Madrone asked. I was a runner, bred, raised and trained for it. So the first chance I got, I ran off. She laughed. Stole my sweet Styx boat. He fell overboard. She winked. I didn't hear that, Madrone thought, or she didn't mean what she seemed to mean by it. What's a runner? A racer. See? Isis extended her leg and hiked her loose trousers up to the top of her thigh. The leg was like a sculpture, each separate muscle delineated, hard, perfectly formed. Madrone had a certain urge to run her fingers over the dark velvet of Isis's skin and feel the steel strength ripple under her hands. I was the pride of the valley once. The pirate swiveled in her chair, propping her legs against the opposite wall so that her pants slid down and left them bare to view. More wine? Madrone felt a slight glow, but she nodded. The wine tasted astringent on her tongue, but rich in the back of her throat. How much of a healer are you? Isis asked. What do you mean? Can you free me from the drugs? What drugs? I don't understand. Those of us who are bred for runners, we raised on certain hormones and steroids. That's how we developed strength and speed. But you got to keep on them, otherwise you kind of fall apart. That's why most of us are afraid to leave. But you did. I did, but I spend half of my godforsaken life raiding pharmacies. I'm not free. Something else was teasing at Madrone. You keep saying bred for it. What do you mean? I mean bred, engineered. They gave our mama a contract. All the stewardships have their own teams of racers, their own training farms and breeding contracts. It's an industry. So is the gambling. You mean they breed people like you might breed animals for certain traits? We're not exactly people to them. That's horrible. It's not the worst way to live, Isis said, admiring her own legs as she crossed the left over her right. You get treated well, the best quality food, you never lack for water. Of course you train hard, but I didn't mind that. I used to love the racing. It was just servicing the big betters that I couldn't get behind. Madrone felt stupid, constantly having to ask things to be explained that Isis assumed were understood. I mean fucking them, sucking them off. And of course, the older you get, the less running you do and the more fucking, until you get too old even for that. I could see the trend if you follow. So I split. I thought fornication was the biggest millennialist sin, Madrone said. Oh, it is. They complain all the time about immortality and the stewardships, but how immoral can it be if there's money in it? And technically, it's not fornication if one party has no immortal soul. What? Fornication is what you do with another person. We're not people. Our mamas did something to lose their immortal souls, like getting raped, maybe, or selling their bodies to put some food on the table. And our holy sacred genes have been tampered with. That makes us sort of a higher animal. That's insane. Nobody ever rated the millennialists high insanity. To us, Madrone said, everything has a soul, or a spirit, or at least consciousness. Animals, plants, air, fire, water, and earth, like it says in the Declaration of the Four Sacred Things. We are part of the earth life, and so sacred. No one of us stands higher or lower than any other. But you breed animals, don't you? Isis said. You eat them. That's one of the most long-standing debates we have in our city. Throughout the watershed, really. It comes up over and over again in council. A lot of people think we all should be strict vegetarians, not eat any animals, not eat eggs or cheese or drink milk, because you can't really raise animals for dairy without killing the males. But a lot of us believe we can't do without the animals, not just for meat, but for the part they play in the whole system. We need their wastes for fertilizer. We use every part of the ones we do kill. So how do you decide? At this point, every household and every farm pretty much decides for itself. We all believe the animals have to be treated well when they're alive and killed with the least possible suffering, with rituals to honor their spirits. I killed with the least possible suffering. Oh, I don't know. My household keeps chickens for eggs, and we eat the hens when they get old. We raise fish in tanks for food and for the nutrients in their waste, and the heat that stays trapped in their water keeps our greenhouses warm. We've had goats, and in our country land they raise a cow or two. And what do you believe personally? That there's qualitative difference between your mind and that of a chicken? Maybe, but they're breeding runners stupider every year, and there's new drugs for that. Really, as far as they're concerned, intelligence only gets in the way. They get too many like us, the ones who can't take it, who get out, who fight back. Well, there you have it, Madrone said. I have yet to meet a revolutionary chicken. I eat what I can get, Isis said. I often don't have one whole hell of a lot of choice, if you follow me. But when I do have a choice, I never eat anything raised or bred in captivity. If you ever come north, Madrone said, you'll have company. There was a long pause. Isis' eyes seemed to bore into Madrone's own, and she could neither meet them comfortably nor look away. So, if you're really a healer, Isis said slowly, then get me free of the drugs. I don't know, Madrone said. Try. Of course I'll try. That's what I'm here for. Try now. There was something unnerving about Isis's eyes, a steeliness. If I fail, Madrone wondered, do I go overboard? Is this a test? At the same time, she had to clench her fists in her lap to keep her hands from wandering over Isis's thigh. Lie down for a minute, Madrone said, although she couldn't help but feel the suggestion was, well, suggestive. Isis smiled. Would you like for me to take my clothes off? That would help, Madrone admitted. Stretching and still smiling, Isis dropped her trousers and slipped out of her shirt, revealing possibilities of human form Madrone had never imagined. She moved over to the bed and lay down, face up, with languid grace that seemed to Madrone like an invitation. Just relax and breathe deep. Madrone sat next to Isis and laid a hand on her thigh, feeling the firm muscle underneath, and desire like an electric skin. And something more, a sense of body as fantastic pet to be cared for and tended and groomed. Great power and great pain. Deeper, breathe a little deeper, and relax. Madrone let her own senses sink deeper, down to where she could feel the balance, the chemistry, the hormones that flowed from glands and swam in the blood. She sensed strange things, the drugs maybe, associations she'd never encountered before, as if parts of women's biochemistry were heated up, moving at a faster rate than all the rest, and perhaps aging just as fast. Burning, burning, burning up, burning out. Madrone's hands traveled out to a pirate's throat in the center of her forehead. An image came, a river and an artificial channel, so wide and deep that without the rushing force of the waters, the bed would collapse. Could she change the river bed? No, but an adjustment to the glands, the pituitary, the ovaries, and yes, flow could be sustained without the drugs. Not at quite the same level, perhaps, but enough to prevent collapse of the system, probably. I can do something for you, Madrone said. Not a complete change. You will have slightly less strength and somewhat less energy, and it won't lengthen your life. But you won't be dependent on outside drugs, although there are herbs I'd recommend. And it could be dangerous. I could be wrong about what will happen. There is the possibility that this could bring on a systematic collapse. It's not likely, but it's possible. Hell, raiding pharmacies is dangerous, Isis said, and unlikely to prolong my life. Make sail. It had been a long time since she'd worked, Madrone realized, and she moved from sensing to sending power, like pouring a river through a river, light through light. She saw the changes as subtle shifts in colors, patterns. Her hands danced through the other woman's chi. It was done. Enough. I'll check you tomorrow again, Madrone said, suddenly exhausted, leaning back on the pillow. She closed her eyes. Was there any food left, she wondered? She needed to be fed, restored. Suddenly she felt hands traveling along her body, moving up from her waist over her breasts. They left a trail of sharp desire, which I should resist, she thought. I don't know this woman. Now let me do something for you, Isis whispered. Madrone stiffened. You don't have to. It's not fee for service. I want to. Have I ever made love with a stranger? Madrone thought. All her lovers were old friends, the kids she'd grown up with, the co-workers she'd grown to know over time. The idea frightened and yet excited her. It went with this unexpected gift of freedom, the release from expectations. No, she didn't know this woman, who was stranger than anyone she'd ever encountered before. And Isis didn't know her, could anticipate nothing of what she might feel. They could do or be anything together. Don't you want to? Isis asked. And just for a moment, Madrone could feel the other woman's vulnerability. I could hurt her, Madrone thought, and the realization made her tender. I want to, Madrone said. She let her own hand slide over Isis's body. which she knew already so intimately, down to its cellular structure. Isis pulled Madrone's shirt off and slid her hands down her pants. Madrone felt Isis's hard belly, her grooved thighs, letting her hand and tongue and the warmth of her own flesh awaken fire from the sculpted form. Under the body lay the mind, the heart, and she reached for it until she found it, fierce pride and rage that matched her own. Like two lava flows, they converged, erupting, igniting all they touched. When they were done, she lay back against the pillow. Madrone half expected the bedclothes to be smoldering. They sailed down the coast, past the empty beaches and the hills just blushed silver green from the early winter rains. They went slowly, by night, moving only in hours of darkness until exhaustion claimed them, anchoring in hidden coves by day. Each afternoon Madrone was awakened by Isis' practiced hands on her body, arousing, caressing, lingering in her most sensitive spots. Sex with Isis was pure art. There was nothing in it of sweet playfulness she had with Nita, or the depths she'd shared with Bird, or just the simple, everyday happiness of partnership she'd felt with Sandy. Isis made love like she sailed her boat, with great concentration and awareness of every current and shift in the wind. Her fingers maneuvered Madrone through tides of pleasure that rose and receded like the great ocean swells. Again and again she brought Madrone to the hovering, weightless place just before the crest. Then she liked to ease off, building the tension and pleasure both until, with just the slight change in rhythm or pressure, she'd make Madrone tumble over the edge and come and come and come. Rarely would Isis allow Madrone to reciprocate. She was comfortable giving pleasure, ill at ease receiving it. They dodged beacons and searchlights, steering clear of the increasing traffic of boats as they neared Morro Bay. On shore they could make out gray barracks and roads of machinery. That night they passed the ghostly weathered domes of a dead nuclear reactor and sailed into the heaven of Avalon Bay. Bird had prepared her for the monsters, and so Madrone was not surprised by the appearance of the people who came out to greet them. Everyone seemed to know Isis, and while the men kept a respectful distance, a circle of women and young girls crowded around her, chatting eagerly. An older woman who bore herself with an air of authority and confidence came toward Madrone. The woman's eyes were clear and steady over the gash that ran from her nostrils to her chin. Madrone recognized a badly cleft palate. She felt rage stir in the bottom of her belly because this could have been corrected when the woman was small. And so much could have been corrected, and wasn't. "I'm Rhea," the woman said in a voice resonant, although somewhat blurred. "Bird spoke of you," Madrone said. "He sent me here. I'm Madrone. I'm a healer. Welcome." She was given quarters in Rhea's house, a mat on the floor, low but comfortable, perhaps the very one Bird himself had slept on. Madrone felt close to him suddenly, and she traced his route in reverse. Where was he now? Had he healed yet from Sam's ministrations? Was he walking better with less pain? If she could close her eyes and reach out to him. But Rhea was calling her to dinner. A table was laden with pots of soup and vegetables and plates of fried fish, and people were helping themselves buffet style. Isis came up and handed Madrone a filled plate. "Eat hearty," she said. "This is the last decent food outside the warehouses of the Stewarts that we're likely to see." There was a friendly crowd gathered in Rhea's front room and spilling outside to the porch that overlooked the bay. Some Madrone identified as monsters, but many seemed to be perfectly well-shaped young men, often in the rags of a uniform. "We've been flooded with deserters lately," Rhea said, standing at Madrone's elbow. "Nobody wants to fight this new war they're gearing up for." "War on the North?" Madrone asked quietly. "That seems to be the plan. We've got a lot of sickness among the boys, though. Seems Seems once they're off the boosters for a week or two, they start to cough and puke, and everything that goes in one end leaks right out the other. Maybe I can help. Sure hope so. That's why I'm here, Madrone said. To help, any way I can. What about us? Rhea said, touching Madrone's elbow and looking into her eyes. Can you help us? It cost her to ask that, Madrone thought. She is a woman of great pride. She answered, pitching her voice low and gentle. I'm sorry, Rhea. I can keep you alive, but I can't regrow lost limbs or change your face. I'm a healer, not a miracle worker. Your friend worked a few, from what I hear. Bird? Madrone smiled, patting Rhea's hand. Ah, but you see, he's a miracle worker, but not a healer. Oh, let's see. What do you mean? I mean, sometimes in life or death situation, gifts come to us that are beyond what we can usually handle. Miracles happen. But to be a healer is to try to learn to make lesser miracles happen regularly and predictably. If you can do anything near what Bird did and do it regularly, we'll be set. And a young man coming up to them said a young man coming up to them. He was slightly built, hardly more than a boy, with dark hair that he had tossed back from his forehead, and he regarded Madrone with bright blue eyes. So you're the one Bird sent. I guess he found his people then. Yes, he did, Madrone smiled. He wanted to come back here himself, but his legs were in pretty bad shape. I know. I was with him in the pit. Name's Little John. He stuck out his hand and Madrone took it. He's spoken of you. I bet he has. He said if I met you to give you his love. He said that, did he? Yes, that is what he said. Little John just stood, thoughtful but expressionless. Yet somehow Madrone felt they would be friends. They were linked through Bird, who had made it back from this place to his home in spite of everything. That was one miracle. Surely others would follow. The room was filled with sick young men tossing on makeshift pallets of old blankets, their breath wheezing and whistling through fluid-filled lungs. Madrone picked one at a random and laid her hand on his forehead. He was flushed, feverish, murmuring to himself in his sleep. Diosa, there were so many of them. How could she heal them all? And really, the place needed a thorough cleaning. She was starting to cough herself in the dust. She would take the matter up with Rhea. She needed more organization, more basic nursing care, but now she needed concentration. Slowing her breath, she searched her patient's aura. Well, there was plenty to see here, no difficulty finding curses or causes for his condition. She moved through clouds of dandelion fluff, taking care not to breathe it in. But there was nothing unusual, just the signature of a common rhinovirus in the chi worlds. Fetid swamps of bacteria pooled in the moist crevices of his lungs. Could that really be all? A common cold run riot into pneumonia? She shifted her perception, looking from the red glow of the bloodstream. There it was. She dove in, allowed her consciousness to swim down the arteries, taste the iron and rust of the hemoglobin. But where were the white cells? Diosa, this would be so much easier with a lab and a microscope. She hated having to depend completely on her own psychic vision. Still, this is why I came, she told herself, and continued on, looking now for the lymph system. Then she was wandering through a dry riverbed littered with stones. She dug her hands into the soft soil at the bottom. Yes, there was still some moisture deep under the surface, but she could not tell if it would ever rise again. There's good news and bad news, Madrone told Isis and Rhea over supper. Rhea had made a pot of beans and Madrone dipped chunks of bread into the broth, eating hungrily. She felt drained, but at the same time happy. Healing was exhausting, demanding, but it was what she was born to do, and she was glad to be working again. We don't seem to be up against anything too odd or nasty, and that's good. Mostly common colds, flu, some intestinal parasites, but the problem is that all these guys have immune systems that are basically non-functional. I don't know exactly how the boosters work, but it seems they create a dependency. Once they're withdrawn, the system has lost the ability to simulate itself. Maybe in time it'll come back. Maybe it won't. What can we do? Rhea asked. Steal us a boatload of antivirals, Madrone said to Isis. Isis shook her head. They don't stock them up here. Just boosters. Highs and lows. Maybe the hill boys farther south can get some, but the problem of transporting large quantities. You'll see for yourself what it's like when you go down there. Madrone shifted uneasily. Everyone seemed to expect that when she had brought the situation under her control here, she would move on to join the groups in the southern mountains. Should I? She wondered. Here there is relative safety, but further on, I don't want to go. But then again, I didn't want to come here, and I'm desperately needed. Do I have the right to back away from this struggle? But that was not the question at hand. Right now, she had to deal with the situation here. Look, this is what I'd like to try. She said, first, any new deserters that haven't gotten sick yet, I want isolated for a week or two. Keep them away from crowds, from the sick rooms. I'll show you how to make masks that can protect them from bacteria. And there's some question of basic hygiene we can go into. Then maybe I can look at their immune systems, see if there's a way to kickstart them again, or if they may revive naturally, given time. Next, I want to see your herb gardens and take a walk out into the woods. The more we can do with herbs, the more we can save my energy, which has its limits. I can heal some of these guys, but I can't heal 30 desperately sick men tomorrow and then heal them again the next day and the next. And Isis, if you can't get me some boosters, I don't know how I'll analyze them without any equipment. But I'll think of something. Given direction, the monsters made good workers, Madrone noted. Within a week, they had thoroughly cleaned the sick room, harvested and dried the herbs Madrone pointed out, and brewed and served vats of tea. She taught them to apply compresses for fever and gave them seeds of echinacea to plant for the future. The latest group of deserters, masked and gloved and housed apart, remained relatively healthy. The days passed. New moon gave way to full moon. In the north, the streets of old Chinatown would be filled with people carrying home blossoming cherry branches. In the moonlight night, the silk and brocade dragon would wind through the streets in great procession of drummers and dancers. What year was this in Chinese astrology? The year of the rat? Or the horse? Or the snake? She should know. She had lost count. But she was in another world. Otro mundo. In this world, some of the sick progressed. Some died. Madrone walked out into the forest, where the morning sun shone down on a spreading live oak. Under it the grass was rich green from winter rains, and she spread a blanket and laid down the leaves, let molted sunlight warm her in patches. The warmth would help. In her hand she held a blue pill, one of the boosters Isis had obtained for her. She was debating what to do with it. I know what I have to do, she told herself, but she hesitated. Without a lab, without equipment, she had no way to analyze this pill. She could attempt to read its chi, to divide its molecular structure, but no psychic vision was that acute. But if she took it herself, she could observe its effects on her own body, watch her own immune system respond to the drug. You've been down this road before, girl, she told herself. How many lectures did you get on the theme that the healer should never experiment on her own body? But what else can I do? I'm not as arrogant as I once was. I don't believe I can necessarily overcome every assault, and my own immune system is presently working just fine, thank you. If it ain't broke, don't mess with it, as Johanna would say. Nevertheless, I'm going to do this, aren't I? She opened her water bottle, spilled a few drops as an offering, and held it up to the sun. Salute, she said out loud. Since the toast meant to your health, it seemed appropriate. Popping the pill into her mouth, she swallowed the water and lay on the ground to wait. She dozed for about a half an hour. Really, she was exhausted, so tired that since she began her healing work, she had declined all of Isis's offers to spend a night aboard the boat. Finally, some subtle shift in her body's chemistry woke her. She called in her spirit helpers, shifted her breathing to the pattern that put her deep into trance, and began to observe her own bloodstream. She swam in clear serum, salty like the ocean, and her own cells looked like fish, lively, darting red fish and white fish of various shapes and sizes, some large and stately, exuding colors and tastes that clarified the waters where they passed, some active, sharp-toothed, moving in to devour intruders. The stream felt healthy, full of life, but something was off, abnormal. She couldn't quite identify how or what. She turned to make her way upstream. Against the pressure of her own blood, she closed the door of her own valves. This is silly, she told herself. You're forgetting what you know about magic. Just visualize where you want to be. The bone marrow, where the white cells are born. She was there, suddenly, amid the good brown earth of a garden, a nursery, and the white cells were no longer fish, but a kind of flower, which grew up from the soil on long stems, turning themselves into balloons and floating off. And now, yes, there was a difference here, a new taste, a new scent, as if someone had poured a chemical fertilizer on honest ground, and the plants were rooting and blossoming at a hurried pace. This one dose won't hurt me, Madrone thought, but if I were to take this drug day after day, year after year, like any chemical, it would eventually exhaust the soil, and then to remove it suddenly. I still don't know what it is, only vaguely what it does, and I had already guessed that much. I'm trying now and cannot track this any further alone without backup. I've learned that much at least. Breathing slowly, she let the sunlight playing on her face call her back. So that's it, Madrone said. She was sitting with Rhea and Isis on the porch of Rhea's house, watching the waves lick the golden tail of the sunset. Little John had wandered up to join them, and Isis had moved pointedly away from him. Madrone, embarrassed by her rudeness, gave him a warm smile. I still don't know exactly what the boosters are, but I can make an educated guess. I suspect they're synthetic cytokines. What? Little John said. Cytokines are like hormones for the immune system. They stimulate white blood cell production. If you say so, baby, Isis said. What does that all mean to us? It means you're lucky if you're off them. Luckier still if you never were on them. I can't believe it's safe in the long run to overstimulate the bone marrow like that. I would think you'd see a lot of leukemia after a few years. I got off them a few years ago, Isis said. It was too much hassle, waiting for them and the steroids both, so I loaded up the boat with food and water, sailed off to a nice secluded cove. I know. She winked at Madrone. And hung out for a month. Sure, I got sick, but I got over it. Since then, I've taken my chances. That's good to know, Madrone said. It shows that the system can restore its own functioning naturally. If you were alone on the boat, you were isolated from contact with the worst infections during your most vulnerable period. So what do we do now? Rhea asked. Continue doing what we've been doing. Unfortunately, I can't just make a metabolic adjustment for those men. Their bone marrow is like an over-farmed field. It needs building up. But herbs are very good for that, and I can teach you all the points in the body to stimulate. We won't have acupuncture needles, but massage and pressure can do a lot. Isa slid close to her and murmured in her ear, I got some points I'd like you to stimulate for me. How about tonight? Before Madrone could answer, Little John spoke up. I got word from High John today from the camps above Angel City. Wants to know how soon you think you can head down that way. I volunteered to guide you when you go. Not for a few weeks, Madrone said quickly. At least, I want to monitor these men, see if their white cells kick in, and then I want to go home, she thought, but already she suspected she wouldn't. Her dreams were still full of dry, dusty roads and thirst. Now there was nothing left of the sun but a pink glow in the sky and a few splashes of color playing on the dark troughs of the waves. I need to get this information back home, Madrone thought. But does it justify my returning? It's still only a guess at best, not so different from the speculations we kick around over muffins at morning meetings. I still haven't learned what causes our epidemics or examined any of the antidotes. I still haven't done much to help the web divert significant numbers of soldiers from the invasion. Maybe I should go further into the south. I'll send him that message. Can I tell him you'll come in 3-4 weeks? Let me sleep on it. Little John left, and Rhea went into the house, leaving Madrone and Isis alone together. Come back with me to the boat tonight, Isis said, sliding her hand around Madrone's waist. I'll be good to you. You won't be sorry. Madrone wriggled to shift Isis' hand away from her own breasts. What's wrong with me? She wondered. Is it just fatigue? But that's never kept me from wanting sex before. Yet with Bert or Nita or Sandy who understood her, love-making would have filled her empty places, replenished her like a drink of cool water after a long run. With Isis, sex was physical performance, demanding endurance she didn't have. I know you're tired, Isis said. I won't bother you if you don't want, but I could feel you and rub your back, and you could sleep so nice on the water. Maybe tomorrow, Madrone said. I'll come early. I should check you anyway to see how you're adjusting without the steroids. They should be pretty much out of your system by now. Come tonight. I've got work to do. What kind of work you got to do at night? Dreaming. As she said it, she realized it was true. In her dream, she was swimming, not flying, but swimming through the air, which was vicious and thick. The air tugged at her like a riptide, pulling her south. Yes, that is how I feel, she thought, caught in a current too strong for me, taking me away. But I have to learn to resist, otherwise the tide will carry me south to thirst in the city of angels. Maybe I will go there, but it must be my choice. I can't just drift into it. Yet her real fears seemed to lie beyond the hill camps and the dry streets below. She was not afraid to join the fight in the south, only afraid to go closer once again to the empty place in her own memory. Lily, am I dreaming to Lily? She told herself firmly. Lily, Lily, Lily. She said the name until a face appeared, eyes like two inverted smiles blinking at her in the night. Madrone, are you all right? I have some information for the Healers' Council. Give it to me. Madrone explained to her what she suspected about the boosters And then she had to wait and explain it again while Lily wrote down the terms she was unfamiliar with. And the invasion? Lily asked. I don't know. Rumor here is they're gearing up for something in the spring. And you, child, are you well? They want me to go further south, into Angel City itself, I'm afraid. But that doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't seem a reason not to do it. Where there's fear, there's power. You said that to me before, Lily. How do I know that is real? That you're actually hearing me? That Sam will really get the message? What if it's just all in my mind? I can prove it to you, Lily said. I can tell you that Maya is well, that Bird has had surgery and is mending nicely, and the rains have been good this winter. I can tell you to trust. I don't have much choice, do I? And I give you one piece of advice. Train your replacements before you go. Don't let these people get dependent on you. Ultimately, that's no healthier for them than depending on the boosters. I've begun that, Lily. I'm going to train teams to work with herbs and pressure points and massage. I've given lectures on germ theory and chi and basic cleanliness. And try to have a little fun. The image of Isis rose up in the dreamscape, even though Madrone attempted to fix her concentration somewhere else and banish it. Lily's thin eyebrow made two perfect arcs. Have a lot of fun, she said. Then Madrone slipped out of the lucid place and into other dreams, where she and Isis lay next to each other, bronze against blue-black skin. But no one is steering the boat. Madrone wanted to cry. Isis placed a hand on Madrone's lips, covered them with her own. She couldn't speak, and then she no longer wanted to speak. The ocean rocked them gently as the boat drifted south. So that was chapter 13. Long chapter. Ah.